I am so excited for this. So my name is Maria. I am an investor at a firm called Electric Capital. And Electric Capital is a VC firm in San Francisco. We invest in crypto and blockchain early stage. But on to Fred Wilson. Fred, I watched an interview. I watched multiple interviews of you to
Wow.
prepare, and one of the interviews I watched from 7 years ago began with the moderator saying, and here's Fred Wilson, who needs no introduction. So naturally, I started looking for earlier videos where maybe you did need an introduction. And it turns out that the internet has no record of you before you were famous, which makes sense because, and here's my introduction of you. So Fred Wilson started investing in the internet business in the 80s, before there was an internet business. He is the founder of Union Square Ventures and Flatiron Ventures, and backs some of the most successful startups like Twitter, Etsy. And of course, for those of us interested in crypto, he invested in Coinbase in 2013. He's also a prolific writer and runs a blog called AVC, where he posts daily.
Not on the weekends anymore, though. I've stopped writing on the weekends, which is actually a good thing. I could sleep in on the weekends.
That's good. I've just always been so impressed with the fact that you've kept it up all these years, almost daily. And you write a lot about Bitcoin and stable coins. And for a long time, you've written about it on your blog AVC. So what pulled you into crypto in the first place?
Well, I think crypto reminded me so much of the early internet. And I guess that's one thing that I have maybe as a little bit of an advantage. I have a lot of disadvantages investing in crypto because there's a lot of really, really smart people who are 20, 30 years younger than me who get certain things in crypto more quickly than I do. So that's a disadvantage. But the one advantage I have is I was around investing when the internet was super, super early in the late 80s and early 90s. And the thing that, we talked a lot about back in the late 80s and early 90s about the internet was how it was this decentralized, peer-to-peer, open network that anybody could attach a server to and put up a web page. And, we being myself and those people who were excited about investing in the internet back then, really believed that architecture was going to unlock a lot of value. And of course it did, right? And so having seen that movie kind of from start to finish, when my friend Ricky Tata first explained Bitcoin to me, I was like, wait, stop. Like that's
what year was that when he explained Bitcoin to you?
I think it was like winter, spring of 2011. And I was like, wait, stop, that's a thing? And he's like, yeah, go read the white paper. And so I read the Satoshi white paper, and I was just personally struck by how it was to money or finance or whatever, almost identical to what had been to sort of publishing. And of course, to think of the web as a publishing platform is of course wrong, and I think to think of crypto as a finance platform is also wrong. But that's kind of the analogy I had in my head when I first came across it. And I had, look, I think one of the things about investing that I've learned over the years is keep it simple, stupid. I didn't make that up. That was, I think, maybe Bill Clinton. I don't know. But the idea that you can overthink things, and sometimes, simple analogies are really powerful. And so for me, it was just like, this seems super, super important. Yeah. And that's kind of all it took.
What are some of the differences that you see between, obviously we're early days of crypto right now, I guess, between early days of crypto and early days of the internet?
Well, depends on how early you go. But one thing that happened with the internet was that the web came along and the web browser came along and Netscape came along, and it almost kind of overnight made using the internet relatively easy. You still had to dial up back then, like you had to use a dial-up modem, and that was not great, slow and kind of clunky. But once you had an internet connection and you fired up a browser, you could start browsing the web, and it was actually like my mom could do it, right? And so the amount of work that you would have to do to get a great experience on the internet once the browser came along,
Yeah.
Was actually not that large. And I do think that hasn't been true with crypto. And so that's one thing that's different. And the other thing I think that's different is that the regulatory environment is very different. I don't think regulators cared that, people had invented a new way to publish a magazine or a website, but people figured out a new way to make money. They care about that, like, a lot. And so, the regulators have been, in my view, trying to slow down or get in the way of crypto adoption, and have had some success at doing that. I don't think that they will ultimately be successful doing that, but they definitely have had some success doing that. And there are some things that I think are actually necessary. I think that there were, in 2017, some outright scam ICOs, and that wasn't a good thing. And I'm glad that, people stepped in and said, no, that's not cool. You really shouldn't be doing that. But in general, I think that regulators have been too negative on a lot of super innovative things. And so that's the other thing I would say that's a little different.
So that's actually a good transition to one of the things that you wrote about for your predictions in 2020 was, and I'll just read this because it's super prescient and just amazingly written. You wrote, countries will create and promote digital crypto versions of their fiat currencies, led by China, who moves first and benefits the most from this move. The US will be hamstrung by regulatory restraints and will be slow to move, allowing other countries and regions to lead the crypto sector. Asian crypto exchanges, unchecked by cumbersome regulatory restraints in Europe and the US and leveraging decentralized finance technologies, will become the dominant capital markets for all types of financial instruments. And of course, this was written in January 2020, and since then, China has now shipped out its own CBDC and started doing large-scale tests around the nation in very populated areas. So, can you talk more about what motivated you to make this one of the, you only made 10 predictions, and what motivated you to make this one of the 10 predictions for the decade that's coming up?
Well, I was just too afraid to predict a global pandemic. I just thought that was too crazy. No, that's a joke. I wish I had predicted that. Who would have predicted that?
Log off by saying you're optimistic about 2020, which...
No. So, I really do feel that the regulators in the United States and other parts of the West have been way too negative on crypto. I think have really hamstrung a lot of interesting companies and a lot of interesting technologies. And in Asia, they've had a much more hands-off approach. And I think that wasn't a hard prediction to make. You just look at the success of something like Binance, and you can just see the power of that, right? That they've been kind of given a free pass to go list any crypto asset without having regulators come knocking on their door. They've been able to do things that I think around. I'm not going to say that people engage in money laundering on Binance, but they're not constrained by KYC and AML restrictions that Western exchanges are, and I'm not suggesting that they're breaking any rules or doing anything illegal. I don't know actually, but I'm certainly don't want to suggest that. I'm just saying that being able to operate in that kind of freewheeling environment just allows a company to be a lot more innovative and a lot more nimble, and that is a problem because I think what we've seen with technology, you know, any technology, web technology, mobile technology, crypto technology, is that innovation flourishes in environments where there's less restrictions on what you can do. And so that's what led me to write that. And I continue to believe that that's what's going to happen unless something fundamentally changes in the West. And I'm not optimistic that something's going to fundamentally change in the West.
You think, I guess, yeah, two parts as a follow-up to that. So what role do you think, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and decentralized crypto have to play in a future where there are CBDCs or China is taking the lead here with its own kind of private digital currency? And then do you think there is a role for USD pegged stablecoins to play to kind of accelerate the US response there?
I mean, look, I mean, one very optimistic view of this is that China is going to not allow third parties to develop crypto versions of their currency, that they are going to develop, they being the government, are going to develop a crypto version of their currency, and that's what everyone's going to be forced to use. Whereas in the West, we're going to see things which are going to emerge outside of government, like USDC, for example, would be an example of that, or fully decentralized stablecoins like DAI, and that the Chinese aren't going to allow those things. Although the problem with that argument is the tether basically exists, right? So I'm not even sure that that's an accurate statement, but an optimistic view would be if the Chinese government decides that their version of a stablecoin is the version that they want in China, they could actually squash a lot of innovation around stablecoins, and that we could get more innovation around stablecoins in the West. So, so it's not entirely clear to me that this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it is clear to me that the Chinese government has figured out how important crypto is in a way that Western governments seemingly have not.
So following that train of thought, do you think for Bitcoin, Ethereum, so for crypto networks that aren't, stable coins, are not pegged to anything, but they are decentralized, do you think that, just kind of playing this out, China has an incentive to squash those as well and kind of promote their own, whereas, Western countries may have an interest in promoting them?
Maybe. I mean, this is what they did with the internet. They kind of created their own version of the internet and said, we're gonna have Chinese companies build Chinese search engines and Chinese e-commerce sites, and we're not going to let the Western companies dominate that. One could argue that that was very smart, but it's also the case that for the most part, Chinese innovation has stayed in China, with the exception of something like TikTok maybe, and Western innovation has kind of been allowed to kind of grow through the rest of the world. We could see that happen with crypto as well, if these sort of dominant decentralized chains like Bitcoin and Ethereum and others are not allowed to operate in China. But I kind of have a hard time even imagining how the Chinese would crack down on those blockchains. I mean, I guess it could be done. I haven't really thought this through very well, to be honest. I mean, this is where analogies can sometimes break down or be head fakes, is if we think that crypto in China is going to play out exactly the way the web has played out in China, then you would come to certain conclusions, but I'm not sure that it's going to be a perfect comparison in that way.
So maybe shifting gears a little bit, but still kind of within crypto trends, another thing that you wrote about is around platform monopolies,
Right.
specifically around this issue between Apple and Epic, Apple and Coinbase. And you said it doesn't make sense for two large and powerful companies to control software distribution on mobile phones. It must stop. So everyone in crypto is very excited about decentralized future, and you kind of talked about that this is what everyone was excited about in the 80s and 90s as well in the early internet age, but that's obviously kind of evolved a little bit differently. But how do you think going forward the decline of monopolies like the Apple mobile monopoly will play out, if at all?
Well, I'm not entirely sure how that ends. I mean, they really have a stranglehold on app distribution, and it's hard if you make a mobile app that has the ability to earn crypto in it, or spend crypto to get new things. That's going to be in violation of their terms of service of their in-app purchase and app store businesses. It's actually maybe the third thing. We were talking about like what's different between the web and crypto, and I mentioned ease of use and regulatory. I think that there's this stranglehold of distribution. Most people want to, I mean, you can have your crypto wallet on the web, I guess, or on your desktop, but most people would rather have it on their phone. If you want to spend crypto to buy things, you kind of want that on your phone. So the phone does seem to me to be the place that you should have your crypto apps, and yet Apple and Google are really not allowing all the functionality that one will want to have in a crypto app to exist. You can maybe sideload an app, but that's not a mainstream thing. Like, you're not going to get tens of millions of people to sideload an app. It's just a weird thing. That's not how people have been trained to use distribution on mobile phones. Maybe someone like Samsung could come along and see this as an opportunity to kind of compete, create a crypto-friendly phone with their version of Android and their app store, and really make it so that people who are into crypto apps will get a Samsung phone instead of an iPhone. I think that would be smart for them to do that. That's the only way it's going to end, I think, is if someone comes along and does that and all of a sudden starting to take a lot of real share from Apple and Google, then they may have to relent. But until then, I don't think they will.
So then it'll be very difficult for you to imagine how these monopolies can be broken unless another big player comes in and kind of
well, that's another place. That's another place that age is helpful. When I first got in the venture business in the mid '80s, Microsoft was becoming very, very dominant in PC software, and then they started rolling out applications like Excel and Word that very quickly went to the top, and beat out what before had been really powerful businesses like WordPerfect and Lotus. And so there was a time in the early 90s and even the mid 90s in the venture business that nobody could imagine how Microsoft's sort of monopoly over PC operating system and PC software was ever going to get undone. And sure enough, within 10 years, they were undone by Google and the web browser and a bunch of other things. I kind of feel like it will happen eventually to Apple and Google on the phones. But it's not clear to me what will be the thing that will do that. I mean, crypto could be the thing.
Yeah,
I'd love it to be the thing. But what you'd have to have is you'd have to start to have some really magical user experiences that everybody would want to participate in, that would require crypto powered native experiences that everybody would want to have and participate in, which is why crypto gaming is so interesting to me, because it's just interesting that it's Epic and Fortnite that are really taking the fight to iPhone. And why? Because they have tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people who play that game, and I think they feel like, you know, they have a powerful enough business and user base that they actually have a chance of winning against Apple. And so that's why I think that, you know, and gaming, you can see a lot of reasons why crypto gaming might be better than regular gaming. So that's why I kind of think that maybe crypto gaming is the first mainstream use of crypto, and that people will want to play those games. And if they won't be able to download and play those games on an iPhone, if they may actually go get like a Samsung phone that they can play those games on. So I'm making that up. That's like almost like a fantasy, but like you have, if you want to think about how something can happen, that's kind of like the thought process you kind of got to engage in.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense. I have plenty of friends who are very loyal MacBook users, but in order to play a game, they also own a PC, you know, just to be able to do that. So that actually is one of the questions that people were really curious about on Twitter, is the first, you know, what early product market fit could be for crypto. And you mentioned games. Are there other things that that you think could hit early product market fit, and maybe also like what did early product fit feel like for the internet, and like where in that cycle do you feel like we are now?
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is that the first thing that people really use the internet for, that was like mainstream, that like my mother, you know, who's now 90 years old, you know, was like, I need to get the internet for that, was like news and information. And then other things came, e-commerce came, you know, with Amazon and eBay, and so that was kind of like the next big thing. In crypto, you know, I do think gaming, and I also think that experiences like Square Cash and Venmo, where it's very simple to just send money to somebody, is something that crypto, in theory, could do even better. Although those experiences are pretty good, right? Like I instinctively believe that a crypto native version of Square Cash or Venmo would be better than Square Cash or Venmo, but it's really hard for me to make a strong case as to why that's true. It's just kind of an instinct that I have. But I think that, you know, just really true peer-to-peer finance outside of the banking system, to me, still feels like something that crypto ought to be really good at. So that's another, I think, maybe mainstream use case that's out there. And, you know, I think, I'm going to use the word betting, but it's not. I mean, betting is kind of the thing, but maybe it's something. You know, we talk about prediction markets. I think if somebody made a really fun game that was powered by crypto that would allow people to kind of bet on almost anything, you know, something like that could potentially be really, really popular. Like remember there was that moment where Pokemon Go was the thing and everybody wanted to play it, and then it kind of came and went.
Yeah.
I wonder if like someone could create something as fun and engaging as that around kind of being able to predict and bet anything. Could be cool.
Yeah. And for people that are kind of on the infrastructure side, building on these layer ones, you know, whether that's Ethereum or maybe another layer one platform, that have maybe more scalability, or you know, something like Flow where it's targeted to a specific use case. How do you think that will look like? Do you think, you know, decentralized applications will be building just a little bit to the future? Do you think decentralized applications will be building just on one? Will that kind of consolidate? Or do you think there's a future where decentralized applications are building on a lot of different platforms?
I think we're going to see, at least in the near term, a bunch of different layer one blockchains that developers are going to get excited to build on. And I think that they're going to be kind of in certain categories. So we know that a lot of DeFi is getting built on Ethereum, and I think that's going to continue to be the case. Certainly, I'm enthusiastic about Flow as a blockchain to create gaming and collectible experiences. There may be a blockchain that, you know, people coalesce around for fiat-based stablecoins. That could be another, you know, kind of application that you would need to kind of, you know, get an application-specific blockchain for. So I think that in the next 2 to 3 years, that's what the world's going to look like. There is a scenario in which you get lots of layer one blockchains, and then over time, it comes back and coalesces around 1 or 2 or 3. So I could imagine that that's where we end up. But in the near term, I think we're going to see more, not less. So it's just, there's so much innovation happening.
Yeah.
And what happens is, you can see this, right? I mean, Bitcoin really, I mean, yes, we have SegWit and a few other things, but like Bitcoin really hasn't changed very much. And Ethereum is having a hard time changing, right? Like it's maybe, you know, you don't want to change a blockchain very much, like once you get it up and running. And it may be that layer 2 is where all the changes happen, you know? So I don't have a strong, you know, there are people in the crypto community who have very strong views on this. I don't actually have a very strong view on this, and I don't have like a horse in the race. One of the other things about crypto, I'm not trying to change the topic, but one of the other things about crypto that's different from the web, now that I think about it, is in the early days of the web, there was lots of technologies that came about, the Netscape browser, for example, and you had some new protocols that came along, and you had, you know, you had infrastructure getting built. None of it had a financial incentive tied to it, right? So you didn't, I mean, yes, if Netscape went public and you bought Netscape stock, maybe. But the reality is that there weren't these communities of people who were deeply bought into these technologies and invested in them. And that's what's happened with crypto, is that, you know, the two have kind of happened at the same time. So there are people who, you know, believe deeply in Bitcoin and are also deeply invested in Bitcoin. They own a lot of Bitcoin. And, you know, this whole thing of like a Bitcoin maximalist, like at some level, that's somebody who's invested in Bitcoin both emotionally and financially. And then someone comes along and builds a competing blockchain like Vitalik and Ethereum, and then there's a group of people who are early investors in Ethereum, and all of a sudden they own a lot of Ethereum, and then all of a sudden there's this, like, you know, financial competition between the two, and then people get like all riled up about it and all, you know, emotional about it, and it creates a level of debate and competition, I guess, maybe, that is different than what we saw in the early days of the internet, which felt a little bit more, oh, I don't know, it almost felt like you were living on a commune or something. We were all kind of doing it together, right? And here it's a little bit like all out war.
Yeah, like everyone has a horse in the race, right? And so
Or
there's
two or three or four, you
several.
know? Like the
Yeah,
people who are the developers are also the investors. I think that's good. I actually
yeah,
think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing.
that's
Um,
fascinating. Yeah.
like, what's his name? I really like his books. Taleb has this book called Skin in the Game. And he argues that skin in the game is a really, really important thing. And so in crypto, the people who are in these communities, the developers and the enthusiasts, they have skin in the game. They have real money invested in the success of these projects. As do I, by the way, in the venture capital business, as do you, right? And so I actually do think that that's net positive, but we have to recognize that there also is some net negative about it. And part of the intensity of there's people who say, I can't do crypto Twitter. It's just too mean and too nasty, right? And I think some of that mean and nastiness comes from how much people have at stake financially in the success or failure of these projects. And that's different.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's fascinating because I do see a lot of collaboration as well, but there is this undercurrent of, when developers are investors, it does feel a little different.
I mean, what we've tried to do at Union Square Ventures is we have tried to spread our bets so far and so wide, either directly in terms of owning these assets directly or having investments in other crypto funds such that, you know, we have exposure to, I don't know, probably 50 to 100 different crypto projects, maybe more, I don't know. And that has allowed us to kind of be rooting for the crypto sector, right? In whatever way it ultimately organizes itself. And I think that's healthier than being a maximalist and saying, no, it's just going to be this one thing, and this is going to be the thing that takes it all. I think it's healthier because our approach is a less risky approach to something that's risky to begin with.
Yeah.
And like if you're all in on one thing and you don't really have any exposure to anything else, if you're right, you're going to make a fortune. If you're wrong, it's going to be bad.
Yeah. So maybe then on the topic of investing, are there things that you've passed on that in retrospect you're like, wow, man, was I wrong about that one?
Well, I mean, the story I love to tell is that uh, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago now, I don't know how long ago it was, we hired an analyst named Joel Monegro, who now, along with his partner, Chris Bernisky, have their own crypto fund called Placeholder. And Joel said to me and my partners, he's like, why are we just buying equity like in crypto companies? Why aren't we just buying the tokens? And I was like, oh, well, I mean, we're venture capitalists. Like we buy seed and Series A and Series B preferred stock in companies, and that's what we do. And like this token thing, that's a different thing. And he's like, no, you're wrong. Like that is the thing. You're not a crypto investor if you're not buying tokens. Like, and he's like, we should be buying Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I was like, well, I mean, any of our limited partners can go buy Bitcoin and Ethereum. Like, why would we get paid? That's like going out buying Facebook and Google stock, like why should we charge, a 20% carry and a management fee to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum for our limited partners? And he's like, because they're not going to do it. Like, yes, they can do it, but they're not going to do it. And I was like, no, we're not going to do that. And of course he was right. Joe was absolutely right about both of those things. And it took us a few years to see it. Now we came to our senses and now do things the right way. But I think we were early to crypto, making, starting to look at crypto companies in 2011, making the Coinbase investment. I mean, I met Brian Armstrong in the summer of 2012 and really decided then and there that we should invest in Coinbase. It took us a while to actually close that investment. But so we were early to crypto, and we were early to, I think, one of the best companies in crypto, but we should have been early to tokens. We should have bought in the Ethereum crowd sale. We should have been buying tokens back, in 2016. And it took us a few years to realize that that's what we needed to be doing. So we've definitely made our share of mistakes in this sector. But, I would say for a venture capital firm, we've been reasonably quick to realize our mistakes. And the other thing is we have been consistently positive on the sector. And when the sector blew up at the end of 2017, early 2018, we did not waver in our enthusiasm for the sector and kept investing through the downturn, which I think is going to turn out to have been a good thing. And many people in the venture business, I think, took the opposite approach. So I think in general, we've made more right than wrong moves, but we've made some mistakes too.
So something that you kind of mentioned in passing in there is really fascinating. You said you met Brian Armstrong in 2012, and basically right then and there, that was it for you. That was an investment decision. And so I actually looked at these numbers recently for Coinbase, and they have 35 million registered users over their lifetime, right? So like, let's give them, a 50% discount for users that are still active. That would give them 18 million users, which actually puts them above Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Robinhood. I mean, which is nuts. So what was his pitch in 2012? What was the thing that made you decide, of course, this makes total sense?
It was more that we'd been looking for a company that more or less was what Coinbase was doing for the past year, and every time we got close, we found something we didn't like. I mean, crypto was weird back then. Like, it wasn't easy to invest in crypto. There were people who were there were good people in crypto. There were people who were in crypto because they were, kind of like almost religious zealots. And then there were people in crypto who were kind of scammy. And so navigating that whole world and trying to find somebody who was, just kind of a mainstream type of entrepreneur was not easy. And when I met Brian, he was executing the business plan that I really wanted to back. Yeah. And he struck me as a relatively straight shooter and straight, forward in terms of what he wanted to go do. So that just all kind of came together for me. And I was like, this is the one. Like, finally, that's a little bit like dating or something. You date, and then all of a sudden you meet somebody and you're like, they're the one. It's kind of was like that.
So then you mentioned, there's Brian Armstrong, there's like the team aspect, there's the market aspect, which is like, something like crypto, there's the product aspect. How would you stack rank this when you're making your decision? Not just for Coinbase, but really for any investment decision.
The way we do it, and I don't think there's one way to do this, but the way we do it at USV is we start inside of USV and we say, these are the places that we want to go find investments. So we kind of describe, like, the thing I was looking for at the time was I wanted to find, like the Charles Schwab of crypto, right? Like, a place that you could buy and sell crypto, you could hold your crypto, you could custody it, at the time it was just Bitcoin, by the way. We weren't saying crypto, it was Bitcoin. I just needed to find the Charles Schwab of Bitcoin, right? And so that was it. I was like, I felt like that was a necessary thing. And kind of an obvious thing too, right? Like, didn't take rocket scientists to realize that crypto was going to need something like that. And we have lots of those things inside. Right now at USV, we have some things like that. So then we go out and we look for that thing. And then, so then when we find that thing, it's kind of people and execution. against the idea. Like, what is the actual product that they built against that idea? And so we've already gotten like a long way there when we find a company that's doing the thing that we want to invest. So like now we're like halfway to a yes. And if we like the people, we're 3/4 of the way to the yes. And if we think that the product execution lines up with the vision, then we're done. And it's really that simple. Again, I really think venture investing is really hard. Like, try to make it simple. Like, don't overcomplicate it.
Fair. So we have 2 minutes left. Maybe we'll just end it on, you know, one thing that you said in another interview that I found interesting was you said, to be a venture capitalist, you have to be an optimist. So what makes you an optimist?
Oh, I don't know. I think I may have come out of the womb an optimist. I mean, I don't know. This is a really good question. Like, is optimism something that you're born with, or is optimism something that you're bred with? You know, maybe it's like many things, probably both. I don't know. I told somebody this today, which is that optimism's a drug. You drink from it and you feel better. Like, I mean, I'm really not interested in going through life like being bummed out. I just don't want to do that. And there's a lot of things to be bummed out in the world. I'm not suggesting that everything's good. I know that there's lots of bad things out there, and that, you know, the world's not a great place for a lot of people and all that. But I just have to be hopeful and be positive. It just, otherwise I don't think I'd be happy.
Well, I think this is probably a very good note to end on. Thank you so much for all the time. This was such an enjoyable conversation, and you covered so much ground. So thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you too. It's great. Take
All
care,
right.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.